The story of drums is one of the oldest and most fascinating journeys in human history, because the drum is not just an instrument of rhythm, but a language of communication, a tool of ritual, a medium of expression, and a heartbeat of civilization itself, stretching back thousands of years to the earliest days of humanity, when people first discovered that striking objects could create sound. Imagine the earliest humans, living in caves or under the open sky, surrounded by the natural world filled with the rustling of leaves, the cries of animals, the thunder rolling across the sky, and the rhythmic pounding of their own heartbeat. And it is from this instinctive awareness of rhythm that the first drum was born. The very first drums were not like the polished instruments we know today. They were primitive, often made from hollowed-out logs, gourds, or clay pots covered with animal skin, stretched tightly across the opening. Archaeological discoveries suggest that drums date back as far as 6000 BCE, with some of the oldest known drum-like objects found in China, Mesopotamia, and Africa. These earliest drums were not used for entertainment. Rather, they were used for ritualistic, spiritual, and communicative purposes, often in religious ceremonies, tribal gatherings, and as signals across distances where language had not yet developed into written form. The drumbeat became a language of its own, capable of carrying messages, summoning people, and connecting communities. And this use of drums as communication was especially important in African and Native American cultures, where drumming patterns transmitted coded signals between villages. In Africa, the drum has always held sacred and communal significance, and in many cultures, it was considered a vessel for spiritual power. The djem, originating from West Africa, is one of the most famous traditional drums, crafted from a single piece of carved hardwood with a goatskin head. Played with bare hands, the djem could mimic the tones of human speech, which is why it was not only used in ceremonies, but also as a communication tool. In fact, African talking drums, known as dundun, could be played to imitate the intonations of language and were often used to send messages across long distances. The Yoruba people of Nigeria, for example, developed entire systems of communication with their talking drums, making them vital in both daily life and religious ritual. Drums in Africa were also central to dances, celebrations, and rites of passage, linking rhythm with life's major transitions. From birth to death, the drum accompanied human existence, symbolizing continuity, energy, and community. In Asia, drums developed in parallel, but with their own unique characteristics. In ancient China, drums were used in military and ceremonial contexts as early as 3000 BCE. Large barrel drums made from clay and decorated with intricate patterns have been unearthed, proving that drums held both musical and artistic importance. In Chinese culture, the drum was associated with power, often used in royal courts, temple rituals, and battlefield commands. The Chinese war drum, known as the tanggu, was used to inspire soldiers and intimidate enemies, its booming sound carrying across great distances. Meanwhile, in India, the drum took on highly spiritual roles. Instruments like the tabla, mridangam, and dal became central to Indian classical music and religious traditions. The tabla, developed around the 18th century, became especially renowned for its complex rhythms and ability to produce a wide range of tones, making it not just a rhythm instrument, but also a melodic companion. In Hinduism, the damaru, a small hourglass-shaped drum, is said to be the instrument of Lord Shiva, symbolizing the cosmic sound of creation. Thus, in Asia, drums were deeply tied not only to music, but also to spirituality, philosophy, and power. In the Middle East, drums also held an ancient presence. The frame drum, known as the daf or tar, dates back thousands of years and became one of the most influential percussion instruments in the region. Frame drums, often played by women in ritual contexts, symbolized fertility, healing, and divine energy. In Mesopotamia, reliefs and artifacts from around 2000 BCE show drummers in processions and ceremonies, highlighting their cultural importance. The Middle Eastern goblet drum, or darbuka, eventually spread across the Mediterranean and influenced musical traditions as far as Europe and Africa. The use of drums in Middle Eastern music emphasized rhythm cycles that were deeply intertwined with poetry, dance, and oral traditions. In Europe, the history of drums evolved significantly during the medieval period, largely through the influence of Eastern and African instruments brought by trade, war, and migration. Early European drums were often military in nature, such as the tabor, a small drum played with one stick and often accompanied by a fife or pipe. These drums were used to regulate marching soldiers, signal commands, and provide rhythm for armies on the move. The kettle drum, or timpani, originated from the Middle Eastern nakare and was introduced into Europe during the Crusades. By the Renaissance, timpani had entered royal courts and orchestras, where they added grandeur to ceremonial music. Drums in medieval Europe were tied to both warfare and entertainment, with traveling minstrels using percussion in their performances, while military drummers became symbols of authority and discipline. As history moved into the early modern period, drums underwent radical changes, particularly during the 17th and 18th centuries, when military bands formalized their use of percussion. The side drum, or snare drum, developed during this time, with its distinctive rattling sound created by stretched snares underneath the drumhead. It became central to military life, guiding troops and enforcing discipline, and later became a staple of orchestral and popular music. Meanwhile, African slaves brought to the Americas carried their drumming traditions with them, though often suppressed by colonial powers who feared the communicative power of drums. Despite this suppression, African drumming rhythms survived and fused with European musical traditions, creating entirely new genres. The 19th and 20th centuries marked the birth of the modern drum set, a uniquely American invention that forever changed music. In New Orleans, where African, Caribbean, and European cultures collided, percussion instruments were combined into a single setup so that one drummer could play multiple parts. Early jazz musicians in the late 1800s and early 1900s pioneered the use of bass drums, snare drums, cymbals, and tom-toms in one kit, often improvising with foot pedals and homemade stands. William F. Ludwig is credited with inventing the modern bass drum pedal in 1909, which allowed drummers to play the bass drum with their foot while keeping their hands free for other drums and cymbals. This innovation transformed drumming, making it more dynamic and versatile. The drum kit became the rhythmic backbone of jazz, swing, blues, and eventually rock and roll. In the 20th century, drumming exploded into new styles and genres. Jazz drummers like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich elevated drumming to an art form, showcasing technical brilliance and turning the drummer into a star performer rather than just a background accompanist. Rock and roll drummers, from Ringo Starr of the Beatles to John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, redefined the power and energy of drumming, making it central to the identity of modern music. Meanwhile, in Africa and Latin America, traditional drumming merged with popular music, giving rise to genres like Afro-Cuban, salsa, samba, reggae, and more, all heavily reliant on percussion's vibrant heartbeat. The drum became not just an instrument, but a cultural symbol of resistance, joy, unity, and creativity. Today, drums are universal. They exist in almost every musical culture, from orchestral timpani to electronic drum machines, from African gems to Japanese taiko ensembles, from street marching bands to high-tech studio drummers using digital pads. Technology has further expanded drumming with electronic kits and sampling machines that allow infinite possibilities of rhythm and sound. Yet, despite this evolution, the essence of drums remains tied to their origin, the primal rhythm of life itself. Drums remind us of the heartbeat, the pulse of nature, and the communal power of rhythm that brings people together. The history of drums is not just the history of a musical instrument, it is the history of human civilization itself. because wherever humans have lived, they have created drums. From the caves of prehistoric hunters to the temples of Asia, from the villages of Africa to the courts of Europe, from the plantations of the Americas to the modern concert stage, the drum has been humanity's most faithful companion, carrying stories, emotions, traditions, and innovations across millennia. To understand the drum is to understand humanity, for it speaks the universal language of rhythm that transcends borders, religions, and time. The drum is both ancient and modern, spiritual and secular, simple and complex, and it continues to evolve as long as human beings seek rhythm, expression, and connection.